All right, welcome back to our daily read aloud. The Wild Robot Escapes. All right, the last time we read, Roz is starting to formulate a plan. We know she wants to escape back to her island. What's her first thought about how she might escape? Because she just realized her transmitter tells Mr. Sharif everywhere she is in the building. Or not building, in the farm. So what's her idea?
To tell the kids her story, so maybe they could help.
Okay. So she told the kids a story. Did she tell them that it was her life she was telling them about? No. So she started it with once upon a time and made it like a pretend story. And that is about where we stopped. So at the very end, the children sat there and thought about Roz's strange story. Then they looked up at her and said, "What happened next?" And that is where we continue today. Chapter 19, The Storytellers. Roz and the children had a new routine. Several times a week, they'd gather beneath the oak tree, and Roz would tell stories about the robot on the island. The children loved hearing how the robot survived mudslides and bear attacks and harsh winter weather. They loved hearing how she befriended the island animals. But the stories they loved most were about the robot and her son, the goose. He sounded like such a nice goose. Roz told the children story after story after story. What she didn't tell them, what she couldn't tell them, was that the stories were true and that they were about her. The children wanted to get in on the storytelling fun. Jaya told adventure stories about dragons and monsters. Jad told silly stories about aliens in outer space. But as the children grew more comfortable with Roz, they began talking about their own lives. They talked about growing up way out in the country. They talked about their schoolmates and their friends and their family. They talked about how their parents used to work together around the farm and how perfect everything was before the accident. In an instant, their lives were upended. Their mother was gone and their father was injured. Mr. Sharif tried to keep the farm going by himself, but there was so much to do and he was so weak now. The farm machines powered along doing their jobs as usual, but they needed to be maintained and monitored. Eventually, the machines started breaking down and the farm started falling to pieces. The children wondered if life would ever feel normal again. "That's why we got you, Roz," said the girl. "We needed you to save this place." "And that's exactly what you're doing," said the boy with a smile. Okay, quick question. If you were in Roz's shoes, or robot feet, so to speak, would that make your decision to leave harder, hearing what the children just told you? So someone tell me what you're thinking. Liam?
Yes, and, do they ever tell you, like, what happened?
We'll have to wait and see. All right, so what do you guys think that's making Roz feel? We know she's trying to escape, and the kids just told her, like, you are saving our farm. Angie, what do you think she's feeling?
She's feeling, like, sorry for them because she's saving the farm from what happened to their mom, and Mr. Sharif is weak, and Mr. Sharif can track the robot. So I think she might stay, but if she can't come to her home, maybe her home will come to her.
Okay. So I'm in agreement with you. I'd still want to go home. I'd want that so bad, but knowing how much you're helping this family, it would be really hard to leave. Emma?
I think, well, she can't feel stuff.
Right.
So she might feel, like, something.
Something like, yeah.
Like, sorry or sad.
Yeah. I think I would too if I were Roz. All right, chapter 20, The Wild Animals. Wildlife can be very good for farmland. Insects pollinate the plants. Snakes eat the pests. The droppings of rodents and birds and every other animal act as a natural fertilizer. Roz wanted more of those helpful creatures up on the farm, so she let the unused sections of land go wild. Up from the ground emerged native weeds, flowers, woody brambles, and with the wild plants came the wild animals. But then some creatures came sulking around who were not helpful at all. It started when Roz noticed a heavy scent floating on the breeze. She followed the scent to a narrow strip of forest on the edge of the property. There were clumps of fur in the undergrowth and claw marks in the dirt. There was blood, too, lots of it. And then she found the carcass. A deer had recently been killed and eaten. The robot's head slowly spun around as she scanned the area. Not far from the carcass was a pile of droppings. It looked like it might have come from a dog. But Oscar wasn't large enough or ferocious enough to kill a deer. What kind of animal could have done this? Roz had been standing there at the edge of the property for a while. She imagined Mr. Sharif in his office, sitting at his computer, eyeing her location on the map. Any minute now, he would hobble out to his truck and come racing down the driveway to check on her. Roz didn't want to upset the man, so she left the carcass where it was and returned to her work. But from then on, she kept a careful watch for any more signs of trouble. Okay, any predictions on what this creature could be, Angie?
Wolf.
Wolf. Anyone else think that could be true? Could be. Quentin, any other ideas? Or do you agree with Angie?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone have a different idea? Noah?
Coyote.
Could be coyote. Okay. Emma?
Coyote.
Okay. So the only real wild dogs in this country would be coyote and wolf. So we will have to see. Chapter 21 is called The Howl. Might be a clue there. Hayden?
I was thinking a bear until it was called, the next chapter was called The Howl.
Okay. It wasn't long before Roz found more signs of trouble. Furry faces poking out from the bushes, musky smells lingering in the fields, silhouettes trotting through the moonlight. And then, one night she heard it. The long, menacing howl of a wolf. Chapter 22, The Wolves. The attack happened at dusk. 7 beastly shapes bounded over the fence and into the pasture. Old Annabelle had wandered off from the herd, and now she had made an easy target. Okay, remember, Annabelle is one of the older cows. The herding machine saw the wolves coming and rolled in their direction, but the hunters were clever. They split up, darting past the clunky machine and surrounded their target. The wolf pack was led by a large male. His name was Shadow, and it was easy to see why. He was quick and quiet and covered in dark fur, except for a long, pale scar that streaked across his body like a comet. Shadow locked eyes with the cow, distracting her with his fierce gaze. And when his pack was in position, he said, "Attack!" The wolves lunged, snapping their jaws at the cow's skinny legs. Annabelle kicked and hollered, "Stay away from me, you brutes!" She was a big animal, but the wolves knew what to do. They kept biting her, kept taunting her, kept wearing her down. The herd watched from afar. They cried out to their friend. They wanted to help, but they were too frightened to move. Well, reader, you can guess who came to the rescue. Footsteps thundered across the pasture, and Roz leaped into the fight. Had she swung her fists or kicked her feet, the wolf pack might have fled. But the robot wasn't programmed to be violent. All she could do was awkwardly defend the cow. Roz felt teeth chomping her arm. She felt claws slashing her chest. Her pain sensors flared and she howled, "Leave us alone!" The robot's booming voice startled the wolves, and in an instant, she pried one of them away. Then Annabelle landed a hard kick, and another wolf tumbled backward into the grass. More help was coming. The other cows had finally found their courage, and the angry herd was on the march. The wolves had missed their chance. Shadow gave a frustrated grunt, and the pack retreated. They dashed through the pasture, leaped over the fence, and disappeared into the trees. The robot activated her headlights, and shafts of light beamed out from her eyes. While the herd crowded around, Roz carefully examined Annabelle's injuries. "I need to clean and dress these bite wounds," said the robot, "but you will be okay." "Of course I'll be okay," the cow panted. "I'm old, but I'm feisty. Those wolves don't scare me." Annabelle talked tough, but there was no mistaking the fear in her eyes. All the cows were afraid. They knew that if the wolves attacked again, their next victim might not be so fortunate. Chapter 23, The Rifle. The wolves returned the very next morning. Shortly after dawn, they leaped from the trees and started chasing a poor calf through the pasture. Roz managed to drive them off, but that night they returned again. The herd came stampeding into the barn as the wolves laughed and trotted back to the fields. The cows were in shock. They refused to leave the barn. If this continued, the herd would produce less milk, the farm would lose money, and Mr. Sharif would send Roz back to the factory. Something had to be done. Knock, knock, knock. The dog barked and the children opened the door. "How'd you get all those scrapes?" said Jaya. "Is everything okay?" said Jad. "I must speak with your father," said Roz. Mr. Sharif came to the door, and Roz explained the problem. At the first mention of wolves, he sent his children to their rooms, but the dog stayed. Oscar had no idea what the man and the robot were discussing, and his tail happily wagged as he stood beside them. However, his tail stopped wagging when Mr. Sharif handed Roz a rifle. The dog had seen the rifle in action, and it frightened him to his core. He scurried into the bushes and hid there whimpering while the conversation went on. "What do you mean you can't fire a rifle?" the man yelled. "Roz, you're a farmer now, and sometimes farmers have to kill animals." It was the first time Mr. Sharif had ever yelled at Roz. She waited patiently as words and spittle flew from his mouth. "My farm and my family are in danger. Roz, I order you to kill those wolves." "I cannot follow that order because I am not programmed to be violent." Mr. Sharif let out a heavy sigh. He knew Roz was right, but when he reached for the weapon, she wouldn't let go. The man stared at the robot. The robot stared at the dog. The dog stared at the rifle. Oscar was still whimpering and hiding in the bushes. Just the sight of the rifle had sent him into a panic. It was hard to believe that such a fearful animal was related to wolves. But dogs are related to wolves, thought the robot, and her computer brain began buzzing with activity. She thought of dogs and wolves and rifles. She thought of Shadow, the wolf leader, and the long, straight scar on his side. And then she had an idea. "Although I cannot fire the rifle," said Roz, "I believe it can help me solve the wolf problem." Mr. Sharif frowned. He didn't know what the robot was getting at, but he was happy to let her handle the wolves by herself. "Fine, try it your way," he said. "Just don't lose any cows, or else we might have to lose a robot too." Okay, so Roz has a lot of pressure. Why is it so important that she stops the wolf problem before they get any cows? Emma?
Okay, I think I know what she's gonna do with the rifle.
Okay.
Because, what was the dog's name?
The dog is Oscar.
Well, Oscar was so scared of just seeing the rifle. If she just holds it, maybe the wolves would be scared too.
Oh, that's a good line of thought.
Okay.
Anyone else agree with that? Yeah, a lot of you do. Angie, what are you thinking?
Wait, what was that question?
The question, why is it so important she figures this out before the wolves get a cow?
Because,
What did Mr. Sharif say he would do to her?
he would return her, and the cows, Mr. Sharif doesn't have that much money, so he does homework, not school work, but farm work. He gets milk from the cows. So if he loses like 5, he won't survive, and neither will the farm.
All right. So yeah, he just said to her, if there's problems and you can't solve this cow problem, we might need to lose a robot too. So she's got a lot of pressure to make this whole situation go away. Noah?
What if the wolves never seen it in action? They want to be scared of it because they want to know what it is.
True. Does anyone know why she thinks maybe this wolf has seen a rifle? They gave us one clue. Hayden?
Because the scar, and I think I know what she'll do. Maybe she'll shoot like a tree and then the wolves will run away.
Okay. We'll see. All right. Abby, last comment.
I might think, no, kind of like I forgot who said it, but she may just hold the rifle.
Okay. Is everyone saying? All right, real quick.
I think they're gonna be scared because it said that Shadow had like a giant claw.
Yeah. So we don't know for sure he got that from a rifle, but maybe, right?
Kind of like skinned him.
All right. Zoe?
What's a rifle?
A rifle is a gun. So a rifle is like a hunting gun, one of the long-barreled types that you would go out like for hunting all sorts of things. All right. Chapter 24 is called The Bluff. Okay, and a bluff is kind of like a lie. Okay, you're not quite telling the truth. The cows peered out from the barn at Roz. The robot was holding the rifle. She carried it to the far side of the pasture and placed it by her feet. Then she began coating herself with mud and grass and probably a little cow dung. With every inch of her body concealed, she nestled down into the ground and became part of the landscape, an ordinary clump of grass. I will show you that picture because it's just funny. All you can see are like her eyes sticking out. The cows were stunned. What's Roz doing? Is she all right? Where did she go? Roz had learned to camouflage herself back on the island, and now she was using that trick once again. She sat motionless for hours, waiting for the wolves to appear. Daylight faded, the stars came out, the moon climbed into the sky, but the wolves didn't show. So Roz tried something new. The robot was an excellent mimic, and she began crying out in the sad voice of a wounded calf. "Please help me," she cried. "I have hurt my legs and I cannot move." Crickets chirped. "Please help me." An owl hooted. "I cannot move." The calf's voice continued crying out. Finally, as the moon dipped behind the trees, 7 wolves slunk into the pasture. Shadow led the way, silently stalking through the night. Covered in dark fur, he was practically invisible. Only his long, pale scar gave him away. Noses sniffed, eyes searched, ears listened. Then a clump of grass began rustling. "There," whispered Shadow. "The calf is hiding in the tall grass." "Something feels wrong to me, Shadow," said a female wolf. "This is too easy." "I make the decisions, Barb," snapped the wolf leader. I love that her name is Barb. "Slash, Lurk, Fang, circle around and wait for my signal." 3 wolves dashed off. When they were in position, Shadow gave the signal, and his pack closed in on the wounded calf. With each step, the grass rustled more and more until the ground seemed to be moving. And then the ground really was moving. Grass and dirt crumpled aside, and there was the robot, standing tall, pointing the rifle at the wolf leader. The pack froze. "Hello, Shadow," growled the robot. "My name is Roz. I see from your scar that you are familiar with rifles. You have been shot at before. You know what will happen if I pull this trigger." Reader, you and I are well aware that our poor robot was not programmed to be violent. Roz couldn't have pulled the trigger if she wanted to, but she didn't want to. She was bluffing. Of course, Shadow didn't know any of this. As far as the wolf knew, he was defeated. And so he did what wolves do when they're defeated. He lay down and he cowered before the robot. For the first time anyone could recall, the wolf leader looked weak. "I do not want to hurt any wolves," Roz continued, "but if you return to this farm, I will have no choice. Now, please leave and never come back." Shadow scrambled away with his tail between his legs. Barb was close behind him, followed by the other wolves, and soon the entire pack had disappeared into the night. All right, last chapter. Chapter 25 is called The Summer. Spring melted into summer, and the wolves were nowhere to be seen. Perhaps Roz had scared off the pack for good, or perhaps the heat was keeping them away. You see, it was the hottest time of year on the farm. The sun was scorching, the fields were baking, the pond was drying up, and foul odors were floating all throughout the dairy. During dry spells, the farm's powerful sprayers were activated. Water shot out in long, misty arcs, and the land turned deeper shades of green. When the hay fields were lush and ready to be harvested, Roz fired up the mower and the baler. The giant machines rolled out of the shed and down the long driveway. Shortly afterward, they rolled back in, leaving bales of hay strewn across the stubby fields. The cows and the humans spent hot days indoors. Only when the sun set and the air began to cool would they venture outside. The herd strolled out to graze under the stars. The children ran out to chase fireflies. And sometimes even Mr. Sharif stepped out to stretch his stiff legs. Trees swished in the evening breeze. Heat lightning flickered on the horizon. Cicadas sang their summer songs. When Roz wasn't farming, she was searching for a way to escape. Everything hinged on the children. The robot needed their help, but she couldn't bring herself to tell them the truth. It was still too risky. Shh. Mr. Sharif asked the children not to distract Roz from her work, but they did anyway. They'd sneak out of the house and order the robot to play with them. Together they told stories, rode bicycles, lay in the grass, watching fluffy clouds drift by. Summer was tornado season. On occasion, thick clouds would start funneling downward, reaching for the ground. So far, the funnel clouds had all receded back into the sky before doing any damage. But it was only a matter of time before a tornado touched down. And the next chapter is called The Tornado. All right, we will see you tomorrow.
We shall